Asbestos, a Greek goddess armed with a shield to protect civilization. Numerous factories sprang up and thousands of workers gained employment in the asbestos industry. But as in many other factories at that time, working conditions were extremely dusty. Asbestos, a Greek goddess armed with a shield to protect civilization. Numerous factories sprang up and thousands of workers gained employment in the asbestos industry. But as in many other factories at that time, working conditions were extremely dusty. Fascinated by asbestos. From the early beginnings of manufacturing capital, it is led to centuries, slightly more controversial technologies, pathetic historical similarities, because it's by the systems and feats of every factory factories, and it is just about the fate of the fundamental systems. Manufacturers are very distant coal mines, so asbestos faces philosophy factory usually having a smooth no, so just the asbestos was used in the city of the massive scale, the dangers of the factory inspector warned against what she described as the evil dust. Hired a medical inspector of factories, and under his direction, the lady inspector of the factory went out and did investigations. And one of the things that they reported in the year 1898 was that there were people getting lung disease from working around asbestos, and they recognized that this was a dangerous material. The lady inspectors actually referred to the evil effects of asbestos dust. At the beginning of the 20th century, more asbestos-connected deaths came to light, and as early as 1906, a factory inspector in France learned of 50 deaths among female workers. In the years to come, suspicions grew more widespread, leading to American and Canadian insurance companies taking legal precautions to protect against possible claims. By 1918, in the United States, an insurance industry official published a report describing the mortality of dusty trades, and in this report, the insurance official said that it was generally the practice of American and Canadian life insurance companies to not sell life insurance to asbestos workers on account of the hazards of their trade, based on reported deaths from such causes as tuberculosis and pneumonia. Yet still, no one would admit the full extent of the inherent dangers. It finally took the death of a British woman, Nellie Kershaw, to contribute in helping to unravel the mystery surrounding these dangers, with the inquest into her death resulting in a year-long battle over principles of responsibility and compensation.
Nellie Kershaw was a young woman who worked at Britain's leading asbestos company, Turner Brothers, in Rochdale. She died in 1924, and it's an important case because it was the first case in which there was an inquest.
The inquest received extensive coverage in the local newspaper, the Rochdale Observer, and presented evidence that told her lungs were peppered with numerous, minute, sharp fibers, which had cut directly into her lung tissue, causing thousands of tiny scars, until eventually her lungs could no longer function, and she died of suffocation. The coroner in charge of the inquest described the cause of death as asbestos poisoning, but Turner Brothers, the company she'd worked for, rejected his findings.
Turner Brothers never accepted responsibility for Nellie Kershaw's death, and basically she was never given any compensation by the company. You must remember that at that time the government compensation scheme had not yet been introduced, so officially she had a disease which didn't exist.
When Nellie Kershaw's widower asked Turner Brothers for financial support in order to cover funeral expenses, his request was flatly refused, lest it create a precedent of admitting responsibility, thereby encouraging demands from other past or present employees. Three years later, the coroner in charge of the inquest summarized his observations in the British Medical Journal, and during decades to follow, thousands of victims would learn the name of their affliction: asbestosis. Following the publication of the Nellie Kershaw case, the British government decided to embark on a survey of asbestosis in the industry, and they examined over 300 workers, and then they reported on this in 1930, showing that over one-fourth of these workers had asbestosis. And the longer they worked in the industry, the higher the prevalence of asbestosis.
There were so many workers dying from asbestosis that the government had to intervene. They found that the situation was so disastrous that they needed to introduce specific regulations to compel the factory owners to clean up the factories, and also to offer medical examinations and compensation to affected workers.
The law, adopted in 1931, was the first of its kind in the world, but it was far from adequate, for the industry managed to have a decisive influence on the final drawing up of the law.
The industry, for its part, wanted to limit the scope of the law, and they were successful in making it so that the law only applied to the most heavily exposed workers in manufacturing plants. And this was very helpful to the industry from a marketing standpoint, because the people who use these products, the millions of people in the construction industry and in the shipyards, were not covered at all by these regulations.
The practical uses of asbestos are very numerous. At least 18,000 articles are made of it, ranging from packing for steam engines and linings for friction surfaces to bulkheads for airplanes. No, not a member of a secret society, nor a medicine man, but an asbestos shield for firefighting. Asbestos comes into the home in the shape of fireproof curtains and covers, and in a variety of patterns. They are one answer to the problem of the careless smoker. Ash, but no tar. If in a playful moment you feel you'd like to make a bonfire of the tablecloth, see that it isn't made of asbestos.
Simultaneously, alongside the development of new products utilizing asbestos, more reports were published by British factory inspectors about their suspicions that asbestos also caused lung cancer. The American asbestos giant, Johns Manville, decided in all secrecy to conduct laboratory research on mice and rats.
The researcher along the way became curious about cancer, and he allowed these animals to live out their full lives, and it turned out that 9 of 11 of these animals in this group developed lung cancer. But the companies kept him from publishing that. He died in 1946, and the new director of the laboratory wrote out the study that had been done by his predecessor. He included reference to tumors and cancer, and the companies who were the sponsors, executive vice presidents and presidents of these companies, met in the boardroom with the Johnson Endo Corporation in November 1948, and they sent back directions to the laboratory, take out all reference to cancer and tumors, and the author of the study did just that.
Well, if you pay for research, then you can decide what happens to it, and the simple fact was that usually the industry blocked publication, so there was always this attempt to keep bad news out of the headlines.
This is the Woodbury Gardens development in Long Island, where wide use of asbestos cement shingles is made. And here in the Sun Homes development, these colorful sidewalls add beauty to the community. This contemporary home shows how modern asbestos materials can be adapted to any style or design. Notice how the asbestos cement sidewalls help add dignity and charm. And this is Mrs. Adams. Mrs. Adams, what has been your experience with these asbestos cement sidewalls?
Well, we've been very pleased. And, well, I like the look of it. And it's never given us any trouble at all.
And so, we suggest you consider this material for the walls of your home. Designed to last a lifetime. A trouble-free lifetime.
Even though the production of asbestos increased steadily during the 1950s, it became increasingly difficult for the industry to keep on trying to conjure a positive image. Then British scientists published results of a test they carried out in 1955, which showed that lung cancer among asbestos workers was 10 times greater than among the remainder of the population. Even at that time, lung cancer was a well-documented side effect of tobacco smoking, so the discovery caused neither new precautions nor new law initiatives. But upon the discovery by a South African doctor of a completely new type of cancer linked solely to asbestos, concern rapidly started to spread.
What particularly hit the headlines from the mid-1960s, and what particularly alarmed people, was the fact that you appeared to be able to get mesothelioma from quite trivial doses of asbestos. In other words, a matter of days, weeks or months rather than years. So that people like housewives and school teachers and carpenters could develop mesothelioma, even though they'd never worked in the asbestos industry. And obviously this was particularly alarming, partly because asbestos was so ubiquitous, it was everywhere. Almost everybody has had some dose of asbestos at some time in their lives.
Concerns about the risk of cancer left their mark among the buyers of asbestos. In November of 1965, the factory manager of the British asbestos company Turner and Newall informed the board of directors that he received daily inquiries from shops, hospitals and other concerned consumers asking for assurance about the safety of their product. Some important customers dropped out. In 1967, for example, British Rail ceased using asbestos for insulation, and even within the industry, concern was on the increase.
Johns Manville realized, as did some of the other asbestos companies in the United States, that they had enormous potential liabilities over their failure to warn users of these products, and they decided to put on the first generation of mild warning labels where they would say something to the effect that breathing excessive amounts of asbestos dust for long periods of time may cause damage to your health, but at least they wanted to be, legally speaking, covered for the possibility of damage suits.
But publicly, the industry insisted on the absolute safety of using asbestos.
The industry in Britain spends a fortune on defending its product and publicising its virtues. For example, one thing that they did was to subsidise a special pull-out supplement in the Times newspaper, which basically described how wonderful asbestos was, how vital it was to the country's economy, and how trivial the health risks were.
In their supplement, packed with positive asbestos advertisements, journalists from the Times newspaper were reluctant to write about health problems in the industry. In certain instances, the health risk may be such that the process must be given up, but certainly there is no indication that asbestos falls into this category.
In other words, the industry was so well entrenched, so powerful and so wealthy, that it could continue to produce this product even though it was known how dangerous it was.